Hello and welcome. This is Congruent Coup with Cass the Coup and me, Seal the Human. Let's talk about gender and sex abolition. That's right. The idea of a society free from the constraints of definitions of sex and gender. There's a lot of things in our society that exist either as a means for control or oppression, as well as those that just simply don't contribute to humanity in any meaningful and positive way. While the actual change of things from gender to borders requires a great deal of effort and time, if we as a society begin to challenge the ideas that are ingrained from our births, we can look towards a better future. That change, of course, is not easy. It also requires a lot in terms of looking at life around us with lenses possibly outside our own scope. How many people simply ignore the plights of marginalized peoples because in their daily lives they just aren't affected by it in any way that they can see or quantify? How many people fight for the status quo just because it's what they know and they are afraid of change or haven't been given a way to view change as a positive thing? How many cishet guys have the worst takes on things, but not because they are inherently malicious, but out of ignorance, willful, or otherwise? It's a difficult task to look at things critically that aren't negatively affecting lives, especially in this economic machine where most people are just trying to stay alive and have their little piece of happiness. That said, if we can start to break free from our constraints, we might see that some aspects of our lives really don't belong. Gender. The idea of gender abolition has been taken in by conservative advocates against trans individuals. If we just tie everything down to basic biology, then, well, except biology isn't clear-cut either. TERFs and gender-critical hate groups love to pile on this idea as a reasoning, a basis to say that trans women aren't women and that biology is an immutable binary. Anything outside of that is a medical anomaly. Now, what about sex? The biological argument, what if you erase that too? Gender and sex. There are cultures that do not have simple gender binaries. The idea isn't to erase culture, it's to look towards a future where people don't fit neatly into little categorization boxes, and why that's a really, really beneficial thing. It's not an impossibility, but it is one that would take a great deal of advocacy and for a long time. Perhaps in a time when humans are more worried about taking care of the human population in the world that allows and supports their existence, possibilities could become realities. If we look to where we are now, and throughout human history, what has the ideas of gender and sex contributed to most of society? In the 1800s, Nikolai Chernyshevsky said that when a man recognizes a woman as his equal, he ceases to regard her as his property. Well, this is the right idea. It's also a great summary of how women have been treated in the past by many societies. Women have been viewed as a possession, something less than men. Masculinity in the patriarchy is a desired trait and held in regard above the rest. It's the source of power and privilege, and if you don't have it, you are less than those who do. There are many things that put people in categories in our world today, but a lot of them seem to be based around social hierarchies and defining what is lesser than those in power. In order for equality to truly exist, would not the differentiations need to disappear as well? Though women have made amazing progress in even the last 100 years, that fight for equality isn't over. That very fight that some women even oppose in their support of the patriarchy, in their support of conservative values. If we could erase the boundaries of these categorizations, then what would be lesser? Women, through much of history, didn't have a voice women have been treated as machines that produce children, and in many instances, a way for generational wealth to continue down the men's bloodline. Aside from birthing children and raising them, though, women have been treated as objects for men's desires. Women have been traded off, sold, bought, stolen, you name it, subjected through millennia of oppression in every form. A woman has been seen as lesser than. Yet, what makes a woman? The ability to give birth, fertile eggs? And those who have been unable to fill that role, are they less than women? What about postmenopause? What about infertility? What about intersex individuals? Does everything get written off? And yet, this designation, to be a woman, it comes before any of this is even a concern. It comes fresh from the womb. Are you a boy or are you a girl? And if the baby is somewhere at the edges of this rough binary system, they are carved to fit what is deemed the best for them by the doctor. The separation of genders and sex, which is such a small part of our existence, supports the patriarchy and supports oppression. It's not even just women here, but people across the entire spectrum of gender and sexuality are controlled by this. We're force-fed what is normal, and anything outside of that is deviancy or kinks. We've hypersexualized bodies, while at the same time teaching children to have shame of those bodies. That shame then festers and leads to so many awful issues with body image later in life. Western society has a weird obsession with genitals as if they are purely sexual, and sex is private, so genitals are private too. Like, we don't all have them? Like, human bodies aren't normal? It's harmful. And it's damaging for society. It creates these ideas that if you aren't normal, you're less than. If you aren't a man, you're less than one. If you aren't straight, you're less than them. If you're trans, you are less than the rest. Less than. As if we aren't all just human beings on this planet. As if every human difference isn't just normal and beautiful. Sex isn't a perfect binary. There's not two sex chromosome configurations that compose all of our DNA. But anything different than the typical is viewed as less than ideal, or a medical anomaly. But even with these standard chromosome configurations, expression and epigenetics mean that a person with XX chromosomes can appear to be a normal male. Someone with XY chromosomes can appear to be a normal female, despite having the opposite chromosomes that would be typically associated with such. And what about XXY? Or those lacking an X chromosome as XO? Why not celebrate our differences instead of categorizing them into this gross and rigid system? From a purely biological standpoint, there isn't much difference from person to person, regardless of sex. Firstly, fertility is not a measure of who we are and how we live our lives. The idea that fertility is to be sacred above anything else is frankly gross. It's one that comes up whenever transgender teenagers begin medical transition. Stop measuring people based on how fertile they are, and stop treating those that choose to remove ongoing fertility as people who have made mistakes. We all have our own lives and our own paths. Second, gender doesn't only affect people that are trans or people that are oppressed. It also creates a place where everyone feels that they have expectations in society to meet. In gender expression, if a man has any femininity, he is viewed as possibly gay and lesser. If a woman embraces her masculinity, she is viewed as abnormal and lesser, as a possible lesbian, being that she won't be reproducing with men. Regardless of their sexuality, these assumptions get made based on their appearance or their social interactions. People can't exist and find peace and happiness without being assigned a label without being put into the confines of a box. And those labels can be dangerous. There's a lot of hatred and violence in this world for those that exist outside of the normal labels, and for those that aren't the superior beings. If we could remove these ideas from our lives, maybe people could pursue happiness and comfort in their bodies without fears and without the stigma that our current world places on being different. We are all unique, yet we are all so similar. Imagine just being able to pursue a body that you can love without worry. Imagine being able to love whoever you find attractive and make a connection with, regardless of what's in their pants, without the concerns of labels. Yet, in our current lives, how many people are restricted by these categorizations and go against what would make them happy to fit in? How many people justify this because of their assigned sex? How many years ago by someone that they never knew, based on an outward appearance of a newborn infant? Is that really a way to live? Is that a way to thrive and pursue a life that we find fulfilling and gives us happiness and meaning? Civilization could work toward an idea where we don't have institutionalized and widespread ideas that some groups of people have more value in their life than others. Some people are just plain awful and will support racism, fascism, sexism, all of the isms that are tied to oppression. A vast majority of people are more likely to support some status quo or say that these isms are bad and shouldn't exist, only to then make their mental gymnastics to justify why it's okay for things that occurred, like America dropping nuclear bombs in Japan, or why America invaded Afghanistan, or why we have an embargo on Cuba, and how that's somehow a good thing. The lives of these people are seen as less than Americans, even more so white Americans. These ideas are spread through American culture and society. It's implemented there during childhood and reinforced throughout the entirety of life. America isn't special, though, and neither is the idea that one population is better than others. Critically thinking of our cultures and societies as a whole should have more emphasis put on it so that we can better ourselves collectively. Better focus on knowledge and intellectualism would help propel humanity forward in such a positive way. Yet it's inherently bad for those in control, and those in control dictate how society is continued. It will be a long process, but eventually humans could craft not even a desired utopia, but simply a functioning community on this planet that works together and helps enrich the lives of all. Fitting people into categorizations for the sake of nothing but to deem who has more value is only going to make that more difficult and perpetuate oppression. We can break free from the constraints of ideas like sex and gender. We can abolish them and strive to reach a place where equality really does exist. It will be a difficult task, but not one that's impossible. We can strive to be better. Ask yourself, what good have these categorizations done for you? Honestly. Thanks for watching, friends. Take care of yourselves and stay cute out there. Bye-bye.